We're going to go ahead and get this first ever independent sales Surtax Oversight Committee meeting ready to go.
Initial for me, please.
Really have to be in front of the mic for good sound. If you do want to move it, just know that the bass is very heavy. So just keep that in mind. Don't lift it up by the top of it, or something might chop off, just as a heads up. Perfect. Any other housekeeping items, the restrooms are straight out if you have to go. But otherwise, I believe, Joni, you checked everybody in?
I did.
Okay, and looks like we have a full house. Everyone is here. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn over this first meeting of the Independent Sales Surtax Oversight Committee to our Superintendent, Dr. Greg Atkins.
Thank you very much. And that acronym is a mouthful when you put words to it. The first thing I want to start out doing is just thanking every one of you for agreeing to do this. You don't know how much this really means to me, because I will tell you that community support for this school district, I've always felt, has been outstanding. But you know, we're at a time, we've passed this referendum, and it's given this district a tremendous infusion of revenue that we desperately need to take care of growth. However, it has also been very clear to us as we were going out and trying to get this across the finish line that transparency and oversight is something that we need as a school district. We have a new board that has a real vision for transparency and making sure that our public is supportive of what we do and understands what we do. And I think if we have groups such as this one right here on an oversight committee for this school district, that helps us as a school district with that mission. So that this, I think, makes sure that we have the trust of our community, that we are expending those tax dollars in a way that is in the best interest of our children and in the best interest of our taxpayers. So I appreciate you giving up your time. I appreciate you providing us with your experience, your intellect, and your expertise. That means a great deal to me, more than you'll ever know, because you are respected folks in this community, and I think your oversight into what we're doing is very, very important. So on behalf of our school board and me as a superintendent, I just, again, want to extend thank yous and welcome to our wonderful facility here. At this time, I would like to go ahead and start introductions if we would. And I will start right here with General Dozier, and then if we could just go down and introduce committee members to the public.
I'm General Jim Dozier, and I've been interested in the Lee County Public Schools for over 30 years.
My name is Fred Atkins, and I'm a retiree of General Motors Accepting Corporation.
My name is Fred Elliott. I'm a 1982 graduate of Cypress Lake High School, and I'm very happy to be here.
My name is Greta Campbell. I'm a product of the School District of Lee County and a retiree from the School District of Lee County.
I'm Steve Shemp. I am retired. Both my children went through the Lee County School District, and I've been involved in the foundation and building schools and a number of other initiatives.
Chris Simonell, Vice President for University Advancement at Florida Gulf Coast University. I have a son who just graduated from Estero High School, and a junior in high school, and an 8th grader, so I have one in middle school as well.
Carmen Salome, I am a connector, a community influencer, and a community servant.
I'm Brian Rist. I chaired the PAC that kind of got this thing all going, and I'm a member of the foundation, and I'm glad to be here.
My name's Randy Chris. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Chris Commercial Group. Serve on multiple boards in the area and have done this type of thing before in my hometown, Marietta, Georgia, and advocated for this sales tax 3 years ago at the Horizon Council. So I'm just happy that we got it done and pleased to be on this committee.
Hi, I'm Michelle Perez Macias. I'm a CPA and partner of Macias Weiss and Associates here in Cape Coral, Florida. I'm also the proud parent of 3 children in the school district, and I figured, you know, I need to get involved, and why not this committee to get started?
Jim Nathan. I'm 2 months short of official retirement from Lee Health after 40-some multiple years. And teaching at Florida Gulf Coast and interested in education, and really proud of the school district and the community for permitting this tax to happen, because it's been vitally needed, and honored to be able to be here.
Joe Mazurkowitz. I'm a 1969 graduate from Cypress Lake High School, 50-year resident of Lee County, 5 daughters. 4 have gone through the Lee County school system. 1 is a 6th grader at Trafalgar Middle. 5 of my daughters and son-in-laws are now employed by the school system as teachers or guidance counselors. Been involved in the school system with chairing the Standing Committee on Desegregation and Attendance Zone Committee. Very excited about this opportunity to serve once again.
Hello, I'm Chris Lopez. I'm a staff member of the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association right behind this building. I'm a product of the Fort Myers Senior High School, Go Green Wave, and I'm very excited to be here.
Dennis Perlman. I'm a retirement plan advisor here in Southwest Florida. I work with many of the companies and corporations in town. My background is accounting and finance and audit, and I have 3 sons.
My name is Sandra Dowdy. I work for the Lee County government. I've been working in government accounting for over 6 years, and I have a son in Riverdale High School.
My name is Joe Caddy. I'm the president and CEO of Finemark National Bank and Trust, and I've been involved with the school system for many, many years in a lot of different capacities. So.
My name is Alyssa Brandemill. I have 2 sons in Dunbar High School currently, and we are proud to be members of the Lee County School District, and we are also beneficiaries, as my senior is one of the Take Stock in Children scholars, so I'm glad to be able to give back.
Alrighty, thank you very much. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize our school board. We'll start with Melissa Giovanelli, Debbie Jordan, and I know Chris Patrica is our board liaison, so recognize Chris. And I made a big mistake today at the trust conference. I did not recognize the board, and I got chastised for it, so I want to make sure that I do it again here.
You didn't get chastised by the board for that.
So having said that again, thank you so much for being here. I certainly appreciate everything that you have done to support our efforts to this point, and you just agreeing to serve on this committee. I'm looking forward to great things, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Blurton, and he'll get us started.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Atkins. I'm Greg Blurton, the Chief Financial Officer for the School District of Lee County and the staff liaison to this committee. And we also have a number of staff sitting here in the front, especially for this first meeting. Thought it would be important for you to be able to put faces with names, especially from the departments and divisions that this sales surtax will definitely make a huge impact. So sitting here, and I'll just introduce, if you just want to wave your hand when I introduce you, right here is Mr. Trey Davis. He's our Chief Information Officer. And next to him is Dwayne Alton, our Executive Vice President. Sorry, there's too many bankers over there and from the banking world. You're an Executive Vice President now, Dwayne. Boom. All right, sorry about that. Executive Director of Information Services. And next to Dwayne is Kelly Letcher. She is our Director of Business Services and Budget. And next to her is Susan Millay. She's our Executive Director of Financial Services. And Dr. Denise Carlin, Executive Director, I almost said Vice President again, Executive Director of Strategic Planning and Community Partnerships. And right here is Mr. Rick Parfit, our Director of Safety and Security. And next to him is our Senior Program Manager and Project Manager Extraordinaire from our Facilities Construction Department, Mr. Scott Rickenbacher. And Frederick Ross, who is our Director of Procurement. And Tracy Adams, next to him, is our coordinator from procurement as well, too. So just, again, faces with names as we will be together for many years. Think about that. For many years, as you have questions outside of this meeting, you know, this is an everything that we're going to be talking about from the sales tax capital plan and timeline, it's absolutely a team effort. So as you have questions as we go forward together, this is part of the team. Some of the team isn't able to be with us this evening, but we are your staff available and ready to work with you as we go through this endeavor together for the first time. So this is a new thing. Brand new, so we will learn together and we will go through this together, and very much appreciate all of your time in advance for putting forth your dedication to this committee. It's a very important committee, obviously. So you have in front of you an agenda, and is also up on the screens. A lot of this meeting is going to be the organizing of this meeting, of this committee. But we will also review our sales tax capital plan forecast, so you at least can have that, and we'll go through that process and as far as collections of the revenue and how we will appropriate or spend it over these next 10 years. But Mr. Robert Dodig is our board attorney. He is behind you. That's why I saved him for last.
The voice behind you.
The voice behind you. The voice.
I can move. Logistically, I'd probably
Sure.
have to move over there,
because
unless you're okay. Most of what I'm going to speak about is going to be on the screen in front of you anyway.
Right.
So,
yeah, and Rob and I will be doing most of the presentation and walking you through the responsibilities and mission of this committee, and obviously helping you form and organize, and the rules that go along with being a committee member as well. So we'll step through School Board Policy 1.26 in those specific areas. During that time, we will actually turn this meeting over from me into our elected chair, our newly elected chair, to go over public comment, to schedule the next meeting date and subsequent meetings, as well as for the opportunity for me to present to you the sales tax capital plan forecast, good of the order, and then adjourn the meeting for this evening to the next meeting. Does that sound okay?
Yep. Okay.
So as far as School Board Policy 1.26, I know that some of you had asked for the policy ahead of time just to review it. It is what it is. It is a board policy, interesting reading. So we summarized the main pieces of it in these next few slides. Some of you had even asked me as we were talking, you know, are we going to really go over what this committee's responsibilities are, and yes, we are. So as I can read it verbatim to you, the mission of the committee shall be to monitor the district's use of the half-cent sales tax revenue to be collected in Lee County from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2028, in accordance with the project list, and to provide periodic reports to the school board. So we have begun collecting sales tax. We have not received our first significant receipts. We expect those in March, but that is the mission of this committee, is to oversee and monitor our use of that sales tax revenue. And then the second main piece, the responsibility, is providing oversight of the district's use and expenditures of the proceeds of this sales surtax to verify the consistency with the projects and purposes set forth in the resolution. And we also have a digital version of the referendum resolution that we can bring up here if there's any specific questions about that we can also send to you as well, so you have. But oversight, as we go forward in our meetings, as we get our first revenues in and we start spending the revenues, we will have budget to actual information, show you what we budgeted to receive, what we actually received, and how we spent it on specific projects as we go forward on a quarterly basis. So as we really go into that, you have all the oversight into how we have done that. The questions about the projects specific to maintenance, new school construction, renovations, additions, safety and security, technology, all of those items. So this meeting, although we're going to be doing mostly organizing this committee and talking about the forecast, that going forward is what the meetings will be presenting all of that information to you. Okay? Does anybody have any questions regarding the responsibilities and mission?
Who do we report to?
That's a great question. Who do they report to, Mr. Dodig?
They report to the school board.
And as we...
Quarterly, a report is required under the board policy for the chair or someone else that the committee chooses to report to the board as to the oversight responsibilities of the committee. And that will be one of the things that you'll have to talk about tonight regarding the timing of that, when you all want to do that, in conjunction with your next meetings.
Mr. Mazurkowitz, and then I saw Mr. Nathan.
My question alludes to a clarification of oversight. Are we to be administrative in nature to say that this project meets the guidelines established in the resolution, or are we to take full advantage of the immense amount of talent on this committee and talk about the most efficient and effective use of every dollar that is spent within the sales tax collected?
I can answer that. The board policy paragraph 4F specifies exactly what the report that the board is supposed to be making entails. And other than presenting the minutes of the previous meeting, the committee's determination of the degree to which the district's use and expenditure of Surtax proceeds are consistent with the plan and the approved project list, the committee's recommendations, if any, regarding the district's use and expenditure of Surtax proceeds, and finally, the committee's recommendations, if any, regarding ways to improve communications with the public regarding the district's use and expenditures of Surtax proceeds. So those are the three items, essentially, that you will be reporting on to the school board and to the public.
Just, can I follow up as just a clarification? Does that preclude us to talk about effective and efficient use of the dollars? Or does it include in non-legalese?
Yeah, I don't think.
Electrician.
No, I don't think it precludes you from doing that.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
I saw Mr. Nathan and then Mr. Atkins.
So I guess I'm in that same neighborhood. I appreciate Joe's comment that there is a lot of expertise on this committee. At the same time, if I understand this correctly, I mean, our role is really to review the recommendations and the process and the methodology that the staff is going through, and not to get down into the level of detail of basically almost micromanaging or you know, it's really and truly an oversight. And I think the more we can get clarity on the front end to that, the better we'll be over the long haul, so that we don't get ourselves in juxtaposition. I think this is, but you know, this isn't the first district in the state that is utilizing this, and I think, you know, there's got to be some way to learn from the successes and the failures of others as to how to effectively do this oversight, and you may already have that information.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
I'm wondering is it possible that we'll get a hard copy of these responsibilities, missions, and different information?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Chris.
Thank you. My concern is that this group just be whitewashed and monitor, meaning once a quarter we come and say, we rubber stamp it. And I think it's important that we actually live up to the tenets of this, which is monitor and oversight the district's use of expenditures. So to what degree that has authority, I would like to see that established, and it may not be this meeting. We may want to actually have a longer meeting where we can say exactly where we see our authority and our purpose, not to get in the way, of course, to be a benefit, but this is the taxpayers and the citizens' money, and I don't want to see it be the school board's money and they just say, here's what we're doing, we have an hour, yes or no, and I just want to make sure that's not what we're doing here tonight.
Can I, this is kind of where I was going, Randy. I think the more we can clarify that early in the process, so your comment, I don't think any of us are here to do a whitewash. At the same time, hopefully we're not here to micromanaging. And so there becomes the challenge and the gray area, as with all boards, when their staff trying to figure that out as to that delicate balance. But I think with the more we can discuss that and work on that on the front end, when we're really not necessarily faced with a specific challenge, but more of the concept on the front end, the better off we'll be.
I saw Mr. Caddy.
I would just reiterate what Mr. Nathan said, and I presume we have very capable management at the school district. I know that we have capable management, and this group really shouldn't be responsible for managing the project and managing in the weeds, so to speak, but to provide oversight and direction and where we can bring value.
I couldn't agree more with you, Joe. So I just want to make sure we have a real purpose and a real committee. It's a permanent committee till the sales tax ends. There are needs, absolute needs. I was for this tax, and I'm glad we have it, but it's the citizens' money, and that's always the rub on something like this. And that's just, I think it's important that we know our role.
Okay. The next piece was membership terms, and I'll turn the next few slides over to Mr. Dodig as he'll step through membership terms, organizing the committee, as well as going through how we will elect a chair, vice chair, public comment, and the main parts of this committee and the meetings that we'll have going forward. So, Mr. Dodig.
Thank you. First of all, I think you're probably all aware that you've agreed to serve, and there's 15 members of the committee and 2 alternates, okay? And it's important for me to point out, because you will vote here shortly on a chair and a vice chair, that the alternates, Ms. Doughty and Mr. Rist, do not vote, okay? So even though there's 17 of you, 15 of you will be recorded as voting. That's important. If one of you were to leave the committee, that's why we have alternates. That was what the board chose to do when they drafted the policy, and I think that was wise. So you have been chosen to serve either a 2-year term or a 4-year term. If you're not sure of which term you have, Mr. Blurton's staff can help you with that. Those that are on 2-year terms, your term will expire in 2020. Those on 4-year terms, your term will expire in December of 2022. After that, the terms will be 4 years. So we had to stagger them 2 and 4, so we weren't replacing the entire committee at once. And this will be the only time that members serve for only 2 years. As I said, 2 of the members are alternates. You can go to the next slide, Greg. So tonight, you are, per the policy, to select a chair and vice chair, and we will use Robert's Rules of Order to do that. And I will walk Mr. Blurton through that. It's important to know that if you're interested in being the chair, that the chair directs the work of the committee, and the chair establishes the agenda and works with Mr. Blurton and his staff to come up with the agendas for the meetings. The chair is also charged with, as it says on the PowerPoint, with releasing the report to the board. The other component of this that was very important to my client, the board, when we developed the policy, is distributing that report to the public. And I think some of you have already said that tonight. That's probably your most important role in some respects. So the chair would be charged, obviously, with doing that. Don't despair if you're the chair. That's why Mr. Blurton and his staff are here. They're here to help you as the chair so you can also do your day job, so to speak. The chair also, and we'll select a vice chair. The vice chair's role is simple. If the chair is not here, the chair conducts the meetings. The vice chair conducts the meetings, excuse me. One of the other things that's unique to this committee is you're not electing a secretary. The chair will select someone, hopefully willingly, to take minutes of the committee. So truly this is an independent committee. So a staff member here is not going to be taking minutes for your committee. It's going to be one of you. And that person should be chosen by the chair. And that person will record the minutes and publish them, obviously with the help of staff. The school member liaison that was chosen by her peers on the school board is Ms. Patrica. She's also the chair of the Finance Advisory Committee, so it kind of works well there. The staff liaison is Mr. Blurton. He's the person you should be communicating with regarding any business of the committee. The meetings are quarterly as per board policy. However, you can all agree and vote to meet more often, okay? And that's something that we left open to the committee. Our other advisory committees, not that this is an advisory committee, but the other board committees do meet more often than quarterly. But Mr. Blurton could probably provide you with more information relative to if there's a need for more meetings when we really get going here. Next slide, Greg. So one of the things that's important is the conduct of the meetings. Every meeting that is, in essence, under the guise of the school board uses Robert's Rules of Order. The simple fact is you've all probably been on committees where Robert's Rules is used. Robert's Rules requires a motion and a second, and then majority rules. It's pretty simple. Robert's Rules typically requires a quorum to conduct a meeting, more than one of a majority. Well, in this case, with this committee, if you have less than half of your folks here, you can still conduct a meeting. We have, in board policy, waived that rule for a quorum. So people don't show up and then say, oh, we can't have a meeting. Hopefully, you're all here tonight, which is just fabulous. Hopefully, you'll all continue to attend the meetings. The agenda should be followed to ensure order. You shouldn't really go off the agenda. That's what Robert's Rules is all about. The agendas are posted on the district's website. If you don't know how to maneuver that, we can certainly help you, but the agendas are typically, they only have to be required by law to be posted 48 hours in advance, but they will more than likely be posted at least a week ahead of time on the Surtax committee's webpage. Your committee has a webpage. One of the other things that you have to do tonight that's important is that these are public meetings, so we have to allow public comment. You are going to have to vote tonight on how long you want public comment to be, meaning how long a speaker should be permitted to speak. The school board generally, at their meetings, allows 3 minutes per speaker. That is not by any means the rule that you have to follow. That is up to the committee. You can 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. I'm not sure how much information a public speaker could provide you with only 1 minute of time, however, but 3 minutes has been the general rule in this district. You also should determine tonight whether you want public comment to be at the beginning or the end of the meeting. At our school board meetings, public comment is generally at the beginning. At a regular meeting, it's at the end of briefing meetings. That's your choice as a committee. And finally, one of the things that's not on the slide is that you have to choose tonight whether to limit public comment to matters that are simply on the agenda, or do you want to allow the public to simply come here and talk about any issue involving the school district? Generally speaking, our advisory committees limit the public comment to matters on the committee's agenda, which is typical. So those are some of the things you'll have to do to conduct the meeting tonight. The final topic I want to talk about that's fairly important, actually very important, is the Sunshine Law. All of the school board's committees, and including this independent committee, are governed by the Florida government in the Sunshine Law. That law is comprised of two parts. One is the Public Meetings Law, and the other is the Public Records Act. You're governed by both of them. So essentially, the public meetings law requires that all of these meetings be conducted in the public with appropriate notice, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. The public meetings law also requires that all discussions regarding the business of this committee and of the school district that revolve around this committee must happen in public. And this is an important piece. You, as members of this committee, cannot discuss the business of this committee to each other outside of the public. And I know that sounds foreign to some of those folks that are in private industry and otherwise. But in essence, if you see another member of this committee in the supermarket and you want to talk about something Mr. Blurton presented that you all may have to vote on, and it's not in the public, that conversation, I don't mean public like Publix supermarket. I mean, not at an advertised meeting, you cannot discuss it. That's a violation of the Sunshine Law. Any conversation amongst committee members about the business of this committee has to be at a public meeting. Can you talk to me about the business of the committee? Yes. Can you talk to Mr. Blurton about the business of the committee? Yes. Can you talk to Ms. Patrica about the business of the committee? Yes. By yourself, not with another member of the committee. So it's basically essentially the law governing the 17 of you, okay? And you have to self-police yourselves because you probably all know each other. Does that mean if you show up at a party for the Super Bowl on Sunday and two of you are there that you can't talk about everything but the business of the committee? Of course, you can talk about whatever you want other than the business of the committee. So that is my warning, and I will certainly come back to remind you if I have to. Okay. All voting must be open. That's part of the public meetings law. There's no secret votes. You can't sort of huddle ahead of time and say, hey, you vote for this and you vote for this. That's a big no-no. Another important point is the Public Records Act. All of you live in the world of email. I just want you to know that any emails regarding the business of this committee are public, okay? So that means your email address that you use for the business of this committee potentially could be, if someone requests the documents regarding this committee or emails, your email address could be provided in that request. So it's up to you if you want to create a new email address to just use for the business of this committee. That's up to you. But I will tell you that any emails to and from the district to you regarding this committee are public record. Similarly, regarding the need to have meetings in public, you should not communicate with each other about the business of this committee via email in a conversation. It has to be at a public meeting, okay? So you cannot use email to talk back and forth about the way you might vote on something outside of the sunshine. That's a violation of the Public Meetings Law, and also is public record, okay? So everything that Greg has sent you so far about these meetings is public record, and I just want you to be aware of that. Some of you are because you've been in public service. Do you have any questions about some of what I just told you, or all of what I just told you? Yes.
Mr. Nathan.
Just, when you talk about that policy 1.26 or whatever, how much of that correlates, because I have not read the statute, so there's a statute that permits this tax to exist.
Yes.
Is there anything in that that lays out that had to be accommodated in the policy itself? So like the frequency of meetings, the
no. No.
It doesn't get to that level.
No, it doesn't. The statute doesn't. I'm trying to think, Mr. Nathan, but I don't think the statute even requires an oversight committee. Okay. The board decided to do that on its own.
Okay. Mr. Shemp?
I have some requests that I think might help us all, and it'll involve homework. But as I sit and listen to the discussion, I'd really like to have a hard copy of what specifically the voters approved.
I will send that to you.
And I'd like to have a hard copy of any of the policy that the board may have put in place regarding the operations of this committee. I don't know, and also sitting here watching the slides, it would be wonderful if you would send us a hard copy of the slides.
Mr. Blurton, we can do
I also have a request that, and I don't know if this exists or not, the listing of projects that was on the website during the period leading up to the election dealt with specific projects in specific schools. And if a timeline exists that breaks those projects down into when they would occur and how the aggregate dollars were budgeted into that listing so that we could have the 60,000 square foot or whatever view of these many projects that we're to oversee, I think that would be very beneficial for this committee. If it doesn't exist yet, I would urge you to generate that. One other question I had in wrestling with all this, you know, what was important, I don't know if there are any provisions to provide a formal outside audit on a regular basis in addition to the work of this committee, or whether that's within the perusal of the committee or a board. That may be something we want to consider. And I think that's about it. If we had those things in advance together with a list of the folks from the district that work in various pieces of this and their roles, I think you'd have a better oversight committee.
Okay.
So I would request that if you do those things and get them in our hands, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So as we step through the remaining part of forming this committee with the election of a chair, vice chair, et cetera, and turning this meeting over to the chair to discuss public comment and the meeting schedule, I will then show our forecast and the project based on the referendum project list that went forward when the ballot was out. And we'll step through the 10-year forecast and looking at the revenue that we are forecasting will come in, and then how it is to be allocated over the next 10 years. And as we get more into depth in that, we'll talk specifically about what can change in projects specifically, especially as we have our next meeting and the meetings subsequent to that. Any other questions?
I just think it's important for us to recognize that that 10-year projection at a detailed level will always be fluid. But to not have a framework to start with would be a mistake.
Absolutely. I saw Mr. Chris and then I believe Mr. Nathan.
Yes, two questions. Do we have a budget for this committee of any kind? And are we able to have a professional director to coordinate all of the communications so that we have some place to get our agenda filed and just the business of the committee?
That's a great question. So as Mr. Dodig alluded to earlier, I'll be your primary contact, and Ms. Joni Al-Shabibi behind you will be that facilitator to help coordinate getting information to you, anything as we're leading up to meetings. She will be the chair's direct contact with me to coordinate all of those effects. Yes, sir. But as far as a budget, this committee itself does not have its own budget line item for things, but you do have the resources with me as the Chief Financial Officer, with Joni and the staff that you have here in front of you and those that are not here tonight.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. So will we then funnel all the materials and requests?
Yes.
Member?
Correct.
And then we can expect to have
responses, yes, more, and whatever documentation that's requested, clarifications, questions about the next meeting, any of that correspondence, absolutely, to direct to staff, to me and to Joni. Mr. Nathan?
Just again, trying to get clarity to not step on people's toes, but I know you have I saw you have a construction oversight committee?
We have a construction advisory committee and a finance advisory committee.
What are their roles and how are they vis-a-vis this committee so that we're not, again, confusing each other?
That's a great question, and I know that Ms. Patrica can at least represent some of the feedback and points of view from the Finance Advisory Committee. The Construction Advisory Committee is a board-appointed advisory committee that meets on a monthly basis. They also have a staff liaison as well as a board liaison to that committee, and at each of those committee meetings there is a set agenda, a presentation, whether it's very project-specific related to a construction project, a large renovation project, There's also items on the agenda about what's going on in the construction industry, and then providing their advisory function to the board and recommendations to the board, best practices, ideas, and they meet on a monthly basis. And some of the information that they have, and to Mr. Nathan's point about not crossing over or stepping over, they have every opportunity to be available at these meetings and providing during public comment, or if there's any presentation or information that they had that can be provided to this committee as well too, and the Finance Advisory Committee would be the same.
So thank you. The Finance Advisory Committee actually made a recommendation to this committee that you allow for a liaison from Finance Advisory and Construction Advisory, so that they would be available to you at each meeting to answer any questions that might come up. So that's the pleasure of this committee, and I want to thank you very much for being here and for providing your service. Finance Advisory Committee made recommendations to the school board regarding the qualifications that we would be looking for in committee members, and I believe most of the school board members took those recommendations to heart, which bears out in the high degree of expertise we have sitting on this committee. So thank you.
Mr. Nathan, did that answer your question? Okay. Mr. Chris?
One more. Would there be a reciprocal where one of our members could sit with the Finance Committee and the Construction Committee as a liaison back to us?
That would be for this committee to discuss and decide. Mr. Mazurkowitz.
In an effort that we're not going over the same item twice with two different committees, and just to clarify within our minds where we are, the Finance Committee is going to talk about the actual financial mechanism to support a project once it's chosen. The Construction Committee is going to talk about the how in the construction process, and is it the best construction project. We're not going to get into either of those. We're going to talk about the concept, the philosophical of this project. Is this project the right project? Does it fulfill the requirements alluded to in the list of projects, or does it meet the list of projects, or was it included in the list of projects disclosed to the public prior to voting on this? And then this is the most efficient and effective way to spend dollars to create a solution for that specific area. That's not construction, that's not finance, it's strategic. We're strategically talking about the best way to spend the sales tax to meet the objectives laid out by the board prior to the adoption of the referendum.
Okay. This is the most fun part. Maybe, we'll see. Is we will elect a chair first, and then we will elect a vice chair. And once we have both of those positions elected and filled, we'll turn this meeting over to the newly elected chair to appoint a member of this committee to record and publish the minutes. You do have Joni behind you as a resource to help. She'll obviously provide the minutes that she's taken up to this point, up to the point where that member is appointed, and is there to help as well going forward for future meetings and in between. And also just a reminder, and I'll step in if we move past or forget about it, the discussion about public comment, and then also the discussion of meeting schedules, how often, those meetings will take place here in this boardroom, but ultimately that's at the discussion of the committee as well. So is everybody ready to step into election of the chair of this Independent Sales Surtax Oversight Committee? We can call it ISSOC, right? Is that okay? Everybody good with that? ISSOC. And Mr. Dodig, you will help me, yes?
Yeah, just
okay. Just make sure if I mess up, you'll step in, yes?
Well, just call for nominations of a chair. That's
okay, all. I hereby call for nominations of a chair. General Dozier.
I nominate Joe Mazurkowitz.
There's Joe Mazurkowitz. Mr. Atkins.
I nominate Steve Shrimp.
You're close enough.
Steve Shemp. Any other? Mr. Nathan.
Joe Caddy.
Okay. Any other? Mr. Caddy.
I nominate Jim Nathan.
Hey, touche. Any other nominations for chair, Mr. Chris?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay. And you can do that. If anybody else, all right, we have the first. Yes, Ms. Campbell.
I move that the nomination be closed on the said names.
There is a first to close the nominations.
Second.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, Greg. You just ask if there's any more nominations. If there are none, then we vote.
All right, there are none, and I will take in order as they were nominated.
Let me just give you some advice. If the first person gets a majority, we're done. So you're not voting on any of the other people. It's basically who was nominated first. So he's going to take Mr. Mazurkowitz, I think, was first, right?
First, correct. It was Mr. Mazurkowitz, then Mr. Shemp, then Mr. Caddy, Mr. Nathan, Mr. Chris.
There's 15 voting members, so majority rules.
So Mr. Rist and Ms. Dowdy, I believe you are the two that will not vote. So everybody that is voting, because you're in a somewhat U shape, just make sure you raise your hand very high so that we can count you. Just want to take our time, make sure we do this correctly. So all those in favor for Mr. Joe Mazurkowitz as chair, please raise your hand.
Point of order, point of order. Is there anyone who can withdraw themselves? Anybody who was nominated who would not like to be nominated?
Mr. Dodig?
Sure, yes, you can withdraw your name.
I see two hands really quick. Mr. Caddy?
While I'm honored Mr. Nathan nominated me, I would like to respectfully withdraw.
Okay. Mr. Caddy withdraws his name. I saw Mr. Nathan.
I was going to do the same to him, but go ahead, I'll stay on.
We'll stay. All right. Mr. Lopez, thank you for that. So our slate is Mr. Joe Mazurkowitz, then Mr. Steve Shemp, then Mr. Jim Nathan, then Mr. Randy Chris. And again, please raise your hands high as I call them, because we'll go ahead and count them. All those in favor for Mr. Joe Mazurkowitz, please raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, okay.
Go to the next.
All those for Mr. Steve Shemp, please raise your hands. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Go to the next.
All those in favor for Mr. Jim Nathan, please raise your hands. I see 1, 2, 3. And all those in favor for Mr. Randy Chris, please raise your hand. I see 1. Mr. Joe Mazurkowitz with 6 votes is...
No. To get a majority.
Oh, we got...
So we have to keep voting.
Here, the CFO. What, 6 is in a majority of 15? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Sorry. Got to keep some levity to these things, right?
So well,
Okay.
unfortunately, under Robert's rules, you
Yes.
can be here all night, but this is how,
everybody's still on the slate, correct?
yes, everybody's still on the
All
slate.
right, so we'll go forward again. All those in favor for Mr. Joe Mazurkowitz, please raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Majority.
Congratulations.
All right. Joe Mazurkowitz is our chair. Congratulations.
Can I nominate? Okay.
Joni, you got that okay? Okay, so we will be doing the same process to elect our vice chair. Are there nominations on the floor? Can Mr. Rist nominate as an alternate?
No.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Semino?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Shemp.
Mr. Shemp? Okay. Any other nominations from the floor for vice chair? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this. And as there are no other nominations, I assume that's unanimous, correct, Mr. Dodig?
Yes, he's the vice chair.
He's the vice.
All right, so congratulations to the ISSOC. You have your chair, Joe Mazurkowitz. Joe, you want to raise your hand real quick just so everybody can see you? Hi. And our vice chair, Mr. Steve Shemp. Mr. Shemp, if you'd raise your hand real quick, please, sir. Hi there.
I don't want them to vote because they'll probably not get a majority.
All right. So at this time, I will officially turn this meeting over to the chair, Joe Mazurkowitz, to appoint a member of this committee to record and publish minutes, as well as to discuss public comment, the length of public comment, how what the format of public comment will look like, and where in the agenda it will be, and then also to discuss the meeting schedule of this committee. So, Mr. Chair, this meeting is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to the members of the committee who voted to support me for chair. I am honored and will hopefully do you proud as your chair. Let's talk about appointment of a member to record and publish minutes. Are there any members of the committee who are interested in providing this service to the committee? Like volunteer interest.
And let me just clarify so the person doesn't think they're taking verbatim minutes, that it's not required that you take verbatim minutes. So obviously we would have a court reporter here if that was necessary. So it's just essentially going down the agenda and recording votes of the meeting and any discussion that took place, notes about that discussion. So
these notes about the discussions would be summary of the discussion.
Correct. The meetings are being broadcast live and recorded, so there's certainly...
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This person would be using their home computer to put together these minutes. Are their home computers subject to
That's a good question.
Public scrutiny?
It's a great question. It's a great question. The only thing on the home computer that would be public record would be the minutes. But it's a good question. And one that might be addressed by Mr. Blurton relative to the staff having access to a computer.
You volunteer.
The Army way.
Thank you so much. That's
who did? We need.
Greta.
Ms. Campbell.
Greta and I have worked together last century and last decade on school board committees. She was only a child when we started. Thank you very much, Greta.
Perfect.
Next, we'll talk about public comment, and there's multiple things we need to talk about.
Sure.
First of all,
let me take you through them.
Okay.
All right. The first thing is the length of public comment. How long do you want the speakers to be able to speak?
Open for discussion from members of the committee. General.
Suggest we follow the school board policy, 3 minutes.
Is that a motion, sir?
That's a motion.
Second.
it.
We have a motion and second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing no discussion, assent, you're ready to vote. All's in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, Mr. Attorney.
Yes. Is the where in the meeting you want the public comment to happen, at the beginning of the meeting or the end?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to suggest in the beginning of the meeting.
There are, you know, the way that the school board, just since I've had about 30 years experience of doing this, the school board having public comment at the beginning of the meeting at a regular meeting, so that allows everyone to give input prior to decisions being made, and then at the end of the meeting at a workshop or discussion meeting, allowing everyone to react to what was presented, seems very much consistent with other organizations I have worked with. Since our information would be available to the public prior to the meeting in great detail, and we would be making decisions at the later on in the meeting, I would suspect following the school board's lead of having the discussion at the beginning of the meeting would be in line with many other agencies, governmental agencies working here in Southwest Florida.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we have the public comment at all regular meetings at the beginning, as we are representing the public and we don't want to hold them up if they have something important to say to us. And then if we're having a workshop or some type of meeting like that that's not a regularly published meeting, then we put that at the end.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Further discussion to the motion? Seeing no discussion, chair, since you're ready to vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, Mr. Attorney.
Yes. To determine whether or not you want the individuals to be able to come and comment about any matter involving the school district, or just on the agenda items of this independent oversight committee.
And even more so, just to items that are covered by the agenda, if I believe correct.
Correct.
The agenda that day. So they're the two items that are available to us based on generally accepted policies by other government agencies is to, one, to have a broad-based catch-as-catch-can, talk about anything that concerns the school board, or talk about those items that are specifically covered by the published agenda prior to the meeting.
I have a question. Do we have the ability to change those criteria as agenda versus non-agenda if we find out that we're getting bogged down by public comment?
Sure you do, just like you're doing today, yes.
I would concur that because the committee establishes the policy, the committee can change the policy.
I would tell you that I kind of struggle with limiting it to agenda because I think people may be privy to things that are coming up months down the road that they want us to consider in advance of not just that meeting. And
but
if we get overrun by public comment and are rendered dysfunctional by that, we can change that. But in the meantime, I would think we'd want to keep it open.
So then you're proposing that we would limit input to items that concern the expenditures of the half-cent sales tax?
I think we want to limit to the business of the committee,
Yes.
but I think it would be unfortunate if we came out of the box limiting it to the agenda items.
I agree.
Other discussion? Mrs. Schimpf, you make a motion?
I'll frame that as a motion that we would limit public comment to the business of the committee, but not necessarily limited to the agenda that we have for a particular meeting.
Second.
Motion second. Just further discussion to the motion.
So are we clear that that's to the Oversight Committee? Because I don't think any of us want to take on all the school board issues. Is there
Absent.
I understand the motion as to only be concerned with issues that are under the purview of this committee, not the entire school board operations.
That's why I
That's
seconded.
Mr. Schimpf, is that what your motion is?
I think that's what I said.
Yes. Okay. Any further questions, comments, or discussion?
So quick question. So,
Yes, sir.
So Joe, as the chairman, are you going to be the one that's going to determine whether that question that they're proposing that evening falls in line? Because really anything can fall under the purview of what we're discussing.
That is, it's usually the chair that has the initial call on that. If there is a challenge to the decision of the chair, it would be the committee as a whole. And then if it was something we look for a legal opinion on, I'm sure we would have legal advice here also.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding the motion?
Call a question.
Question's been called. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Who seconded that? I didn't see who on the table.
Mr. Christ seconded, I bet.
Mr. Chris, yes. I'm sorry. Once I get better informed as to where everybody is and what the names are, I'll be able to better announce who moved in second each item. The next item we need to talk about is the meeting schedule, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I think Mr. Blurton might be able to.
Correct. As in the school board policy, and as we talked a little bit about earlier this, when the meeting started, was at least quarterly. And that's how it is set currently, is that this committee would meet on a quarterly basis. And as we look at other school districts that do have very similar committees, the majority, if not all of them, meet on a quarterly basis. And essentially during the school year, our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. Every quarter, so for instance, let's start a brand new school year, July 1, 2019, coming up. We will have July, August, and September of collections, and in September we'll have a large collection. And in that October, we will present to you what we have collected and how we have appropriated in that quarter based on our school year. And then subsequently for the next quarter and so on a quarterly basis is how the majority of school districts with independent oversight committees such as this one meet. But you as the committee, it is for your discussion when those meetings should take place, and we are here to help answer questions and go as you go through this process.
Members of the committee.
Do we have to talk about how long in total we're going to allow for public comment, or are we going to just let them go on?
We did that 3 minutes.
No, you said 3 minutes.
3 minutes. If there's 100 people here, it's 300 minutes.
Okay, so we're just going to go on for all night.
I think what we can do is once again, common sense will prevail. if we find ourselves being inundated with a vast number of folks wanting to speak, we can come back and say at 20 minutes or whatever.
Okay.
So that's something I think we can deal with as it presents itself. Greta.
Clarification, you talked about us meeting, an example you gave was that collections would be July through September, we meet in October. But if we meet every 4 months, which is not quarterly, then we'll only meet.
No, your meeting would be October, and then we would collect October, November, December. You'd meet in January, and so on and so forth. It is totally up to this committee how you would like to do it.
Okay, because I was thinking we would meet, say, at the end of, in September, and then.
That is absolutely this committee's discretion. And
so that we meet 4 times within the fiscal year.
correct. And at each of those meetings, we'll be able to report to you actual collections of revenue and how we've spent it versus how we budgeted.
Mr. Schimpf?
Question. I'm featuring that perhaps we would want to meet quarterly. We could supplement that with requested workshops that staff could put on for us to get us up to speed in this first year.
You could, yes. Absolutely.
We could limit it to 4 and then do workshops.
And also in between, if there's information requests or you know, and one of the points I want to make, I believe the question and suggestion you had made earlier, Mr. Schimpf, was you know, having the information, the budget forecast information, the actuals to budget, all of that, the project lists, having that well in advance of the meetings. We will absolutely have that information to you well in advance of every meeting, but also in between, as you have questions about, you know, the projects, or if you have specific question for Mr. Davis or Mr. Alton about some of the technology projects that we have coming, or our next a high school project for Mr. Rickenbacker, we can provide that information and have those discussions with you individually in between our meetings as well. So workshops, correspondence, what have you.
Yes, sir.
Just a question. I'm not sure for the chair or Mr. Blurton, but you suggested that at a quarterly meeting we would retrospectively review the expenditures of the Surtax. Is there an opportunity for us to talk about the prospective use of that, as I believe your policy states that the committee's recommendations regarding the district's use and expenditure, are we going to be addressing them prospectively?
Absolutely. So what we're going to review today is the budget, the 10-year plan, the forecast as we went through the referendum. So you'll see the revenue and then the expenses for the $754 million that we had talked about as we went through the campaign and ultimately getting the ballot passed. So we'll review that today, and it's a forecast, but as we go into our next meeting and beyond, as that changes, we will review absolutely the history, but we will also review what is coming down the pike for this next quarter, the projects that we have coming, the facility renewals and maintenance, technology, safety and security, school construction for the next quarter, for this remainder of this fiscal year, and beyond as well too. Good question.
Mr. Nathan?
You may have already, with their comments about the receipts, may have already backed us into when those quarterly meetings would logically fit. So is it the month after the quarterly receipts? I mean, those dates are set, right?
When we get those, yes. So if you, as we go through each of the quarters, so we're expecting our first big infusion of sales tax revenue in March. Don't know the exact date. It is possible that we could have our next meeting date the last Thursday or Friday or whatever this committee decides. I don't know if you want to meet at 6 o'clock on a Friday. That's not a plug. Or whatever the date that you decide towards the end of March. Would be, we will, and we can communicate with you, let you know when we're expecting, the biggest infusion of that revenue and how we've appropriated it to set that date. So we can set a date in March. Then the next obvious date would be April, May, June, would be at the end of this current fiscal year, the last meaningful date of or the last someday in the week, the last week of June, ending of our fiscal year, and then we start the next fiscal year. And we can go on so on and so forth that way. Mr. Schimpf.
Correct me if I'm getting into too much detail, but it doesn't seem to me that we would that you're reactionary if you are looking at just the receipts. It seems to me that we should be looking farther out in time as to how funds will be expended. That's why I asked for the long-term schedule, the specifics of the items, the locations, and the dollars. I would hope that staff would bring a recommendation if this board does not approve the expenditure of the funds.
Correct.
The school board does that.
Correct.
We monitor whether the approvals that have been granted and the funds that have come in are being properly expended within the context of the resolution.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure that when you got the money in the door necessarily should drive.
Yeah.
No. And it is the committee's.
This is a budget review, so it's prospective, and then a review of the money after spent. So it is, at that point, we fulfill our role of maintaining oversight to make sure it was spent the way we intended to be. We originally recommended it to be spent. Randy.
So I wouldn't want us to get confused on the numbers, because there's a projection. They know approximately how many million they're going to make for the whole tax time. They know approximately how much it's going to be per quarter. Whether it's down to the dime is not our mission here. So we are to monitor and oversight of the use and expenditures, and I don't want to get locked into one meeting a month, come in here for an hour, here's what we did, thank you very much, and we vote. And that was what I expressed in the beginning.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to micromanage the school board, but true oversight is oversight.
Yeah, I think there, as I said in one of my earlier comments, is that I think we're strategic in nature. We're going to review the expenditures from an efficiency and effectiveness, and then monitor that they are spent to meet the criteria that's identified in the list, and it's the best way to spend those dollars. It's not. We're not going to go over and redo what the construction committee does. We're not going to go over and redo what the finance committee does. We are solely interested in the sales tax revenue, and from my experience in government, it's budgeted. We're looking at what is proposed in the budget. If there are deltas from the collection from what's budgeted, we will be informed of those deltas, and then we will have recommendations to be made with regard to those deltas. So I really see us as having that kind of strategic oversight of those dollars, and not getting into how money is spent specifically within a project. It's specifically towards a project, not within projects. Any other let's talk, any other discussion? We're getting away from the meeting schedule. I know the meeting schedule is somewhat tied to what we believe our purpose is. Any other discussion specifically about meeting schedule? Yes, sir, Randy.
I just don't see how we can adequately do this job once a quarter, and I'm proposing that we meet once a month. And if that doesn't work, we can change. But until we get this ramped up and see what's going on, I think we need to be together and see what's going on.
Any other discussion for members of the committee?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's over here. So the first funds that you're going to receive, they're projected out, right?
Correct.
They will come in April for the first quarter?
We're expecting our first real infusion of sales tax revenue in March. We've been collecting since January 1st, but as we've worked with other districts and looked at other districts and talking with the tax collectors, that's when we're expecting the first big chunk is in March of this year. So we have our budget for the remainder of this current school year, this current fiscal year, out through June 30th, and then for the next year and out to the next and beyond to the 10 years.
Mr. Chairman?
The infusion will be in March, and then
Correct.
you receive it monthly or quarterly thereafter?
We could receive money coming in on a monthly basis, but our understanding is the majority of the revenue comes in quarterly.
Mr. Caddy.
I would propose that we start off meeting quarterly, and if you see that there's a need to meet more frequently, then that determination could be made at that time.
Mr. Ship.
I'm in agreement with the quarterly, but I would like to have staff pull together a recommendation as to what workshops you might recommend we experience in order to put all the information that you folks have in your heads at a proper level in our heads. Get us up to speed, bring us a recommendation as to how you propose to do that.
Okay.
But meet quarterly, and basically we'd all have to recognize that in the early time frame, we'd have to spend more time, and that's not unexpected, but.
Mr. Nathan.
So I'm just hearing from Joe and then Steve. But nobody made it into a motion, so I would move that we meet on a quarterly basis and that the chair and Mr. Blurton work on figuring out what education that we need, if we need additional education, and figure that out. But we actually have a formal motion to meet on.
And I would second that.
Motion made by Mr. Nathan, seconded by Mr. Caddy. Other discussion to the motion on the floor?
I'm concerned in that we meet quarterly, but I believe we need information before that meeting. I need to see what's going on and what's being projected.
I think the motion clearly establishes the need for the staff to get together with the chair to lay out a series of workshops, informative meetings to get us up to speed, so when we have our first quarterly meeting, we feel comfortable that we have the information necessary and we have an understanding of that information. So if we feel comfortable making motions to make a recommendation to the board regarding the expenditure of the half-cent sales tax.
That was the motion.
That's what I heard.
Call for the question.
My second.
Other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing no accentuated vote, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm on the airport authority, and it's a sunshine committee, much like this, and we can't meet and talk business between the committee members. And monthly, we get a briefing that is emailed to us that shows everything that's happening, projects, updates, money spent, where money came from. I have a good idea going into each meeting what they're doing, and I would like to make a motion that we propose to the administration that we get such a briefing that would satisfy Carmen's concerns, and they then show us, you know, get a dashboard, revenue in, proposed projects, stuff that we can get our teeth into and digest.
Would the motion maker just yield to a request of the chair that you hold that motion until you allow me to meet with staff, determine the amount of information distributed to everybody, and then once we have all the information, come back at least one workshop before we meet in the next quarter, because not everyone reviews material in the same manner. Not everyone needs the same depth of material, so that we could have the materials shared with us individually. We could, at that point, individually talk to staff, which we can do, to give them insight as to how we would prefer the information coming to us. Do we prefer the full depth of information? Do we prefer 5 bullet points? And so they can prepare that and share that same information to all of us, each one of us picking and choosing of that information which we choose to best prepare ourselves to come to the next meeting. So in essence, we would do exactly what you said, and we would get to that point with some initial discussions with staff, sharing some information, coming back on a workshop, and then fine-tuning how we as committee members want staff to share future information with us.
I will withdraw my motion at this time with the caveat that you do exactly what you promised.
You have my word.
Thank you.
Any other discussion at this point? We are to public comment.
Correct.
Any members of the public wish to address the committee?
Feedback.
Yes, sir. Please state your name so we know who you are.
Come on up to the podium here, so I can.
You gotta go to the podium.
If you come to the podium, I can time you here. So, yeah. No, take your time.
I'm B. Pat O'Rourke. I live at 616 Wildwood Parkway, Cape Coral. I served on the PAC that was raising money to bring this about, which I'm very proud of. And I know about 11 people on this dais that I've worked with economic development over the years, who either know or have actually worked with. And I couldn't be more pleased with those 11 that I know, and I have the sense that the rest are just as highly qualified. This has really put together a great group. So the one question I have, I think has been answered. I had it in my mind front and back, and that is that this committee would be involved on the front end of these projects in terms of the budgeting, in terms of the so on, and not on the back end where you're just sort of approving what's going on. So am I correct in that sense?
Yes, sir. I think what the committee has alluded to is that strategically we will be involved up front, and then from an oversight standpoint, we'll be involved after the fact.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to address the committee? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Greg, you take us to the next item.
Yes, I'm happy to. Rob, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, I'm good.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Talk to Mr. Mazurkowitz otherwise offline
The next meeting
regarding
will be in March.
letting the person finish and then respond to them, so you don't take their time. That's all.
What I think, but I'm not sure.
So Joni is going to go ahead and give you a hard copy handout of our 10-year sales tax capital plan forecast, and I'm going to bring it up here on the screen as well too. I know this is hard to see. That's why we have a hard copy for you. And so all what you have here, as well as all other supporting materials, we will email to each of you. And what you have in front of you is our budget forecast. And I'm going to get this a little bit larger here for you. I know that's
this will not meet the needs of those of us who are visually impaired. Do you understand that, right? I agree.
I completely understand. So one of the things that I do want to, as I step through this and summarize what you have in front of you, this is a forecast, and I know a lot of you are very familiar with forecasts. We have a lot of financial wherewithal and experience as part of this committee. So what we have in front of you is for the remainder of this fiscal year, FY19, we are, again, a school district's fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30th. So in actuality, this remaining a part of this school year, of this fiscal year, is a partial collection year. We started collecting in January 1 and it will end June 30th of this year. And then we have FY20 going out to FY28 as full collection years, and then the last year of this referendum, it will be ending in 2029. That will also be a half partial collection year. So what you have in the forecast in front of you on the top is a summary of our sales tax, our anticipated sales tax revenue going across the top each year. You'll see in 18-19, we are forecasting half of the revenue, approximately $31.6 million. We do also add a line in there for interest income. As we receive this revenue, it will be sitting in an interest-bearing account. So it will be earning interest. So we also will factor in the interest income and forecast that accordingly, and also report it in actuals as we start collecting and going forward. We also have a prior year carryover, and what is important to note in the carryover, these are carryover budgeted funds from one year to the next, and where you will see most of the carryover is we do have projects, construction projects, maintenance projects, technology projects, safety and security projects that are done during the summer and will span 2 fiscal years. They will be going on, for instance, April, May, June, and carry on into July and August while schools are closed, and that's where a lot of that work gets done. So as you see carryover dollars, and as we go forward in looking forward on these projects and in this budget, you will have that information, and we will have the explanations as to what the carryover is on a quarter to quarter and definitely from year to year. Then appropriations, fancy term for how did we spend the money. Construction projects, safety projects, maintenance projects, and technology projects. And then you have our carry forward and reserve future projects. There will be an added revenue line that we will probably put in here. It is for revenue anticipation notes. So we do have the ability to go out with anticipated revenue of the sales tax. We can receive a sales tax bond to get that. We can actually have monies that will be lent to us from our lenders in anticipation of the sales tax revenue that we could then use to build some of these schools, get these schools going, and then reimburse ourselves with the sales tax revenue to pay that back down. It gives us that flexibility. And then how we appropriate that out is obviously the payment of that debt, if you will. So these are things that we will absolutely discuss with you, that we will bring forward to you at our meetings and in between. This is absolutely one of those areas, Mr. Shemp, as you had mentioned, as a workshop. Where we can talk about those strategies. Our financial advisor, Ford & Associates, will actually be down here in a few weeks and be meeting with board members to discuss a lot of these debt strategies specific to sales tax, but also just to the district's overall capital plan as well. And then as you go down the detail below, that first part is how we are appropriating for the construction projects, for our safety projects, maintenance projects, and then technology. And these are, you know, summary line items and in general categories. And then we do have the detail as well, project by project. Again, speaking to some more of the information that you are requesting as a committee is the information that we can provide to you. One of the things, the numbers that you have here is it matches our referendum, our project list, the things that we know that we have coming down the pike with new school construction, the maintenance and facility renewals, safety and security, technology. What is a very important note, and a few of you on the committee had said that, is it's a living budget. Things happen, priorities change. An unfortunate example is the tragedy in Parkland at Marjorie Stoneman. Changed a lot of things, a lot of the needs that we had in going to securing our schools. That was a dramatic shift that we had to do this past year and are continuing to do. We may see a shift in student population and where our enrollment forecasts are going. If you rewind the clock 10 plus years ago, most of our growth was in our west zone in Cape Coral. That has shifted over into our east zone, primarily Lehigh and East Fort Myers. We see a lot more growth coming just this particular school year, and we've seen some of the enrollment trends going for more growth in the west zone back to Cape Coral. We will be staying on top of that and bringing those forward to you. So you may see another school pop up into this 10-year forecast or move from one place to the other, especially as it's further out. Maintenance. We have been in a reactionary state for our maintenance department for several years. Now we have an opportunity to try and catch up a little bit, but again, we have over 13 million square feet of facilities and schools out there, and it's a lot to keep up with and it's a lot to maintain. We may have another weather event that may, again, change how this budget looks and how we will utilize the sales tax, but that is us as staff to provide that information to you in a timely manner as you request it, and being proactive in getting that information to you, and then as we meet on a quarterly basis how these things are changing, and then recommending to you how we are doing this, and obviously the oversight that you provide as we go forward to this. So as you go through this, I know that a few of you had mentioned as far as specific projects, and I'm just kind of keeping what is on the screen in these 5 years here, just because some of you are visually impaired, as the chair had said. Construction projects. So when you see East Zone, these are schools that we have forecasted and will be building in our East Zone. We have a middle school that we are already starting to go through the RFP process with our construction managers and architects. High school M, we've been underway and we expect to break ground here within the next few months over the summer. In our South Zone, we have projected an elementary and middle school. We've also had in our referendum the discussion and having a new career and technical ed school. That is actually a school where the district, where we have budgeted with sales tax to be more of a public-private partnership, and what you see in this sales tax budget is our part of that partnership. And then rebuilds, you see what rebuilds, so we have Cypress Lake Middle School and Franklin Park Elementary School. These are two of our older schools that it is very costly to maintain. We are in that we have created and submitted what we call custody reports. We have people with the expertise to go out and look at these schools and make their suggestion that yes, they need to be rebuilt, but it is ultimately in the state's hands to approve those. So we are in the process of submitting those reports to the state for their review. It is at least a 6-month process for their review and ultimate approval. And as that goes through, then we start engaging our professionals in how we will stage those schools for the students that are already going there. Where will those students go while we are tearing down those schools and rebuilding them? So we have specific projects in our construction area. Those are things that we know, and we don't see much change in these projects as far as what the projects will be. But those of you in the commercial real estate and construction, banking, finance, accounting worlds know that costs continue to increase, and these are things that we're going to have to stay ahead of and update these numbers as we go, and that will also ultimately decide upon our structure and how we will forecast the budget and where sales tax dollars will go, and where we may have an opportunity to leverage debt for these as well too. So, and then if we step down onto the next areas for safety projects. What's important to note here, you see what has been budgeted for 18-19, this current school year. It seems like a small amount for lockdown view panels. We've already done quite a bit already for this year, and we actually submitted for and received a very sizable grant to also go towards the safety and security of our schools. There's also parts of that grant that will be going to other parts of the district, but there was specific language in that grant that will go to safety and security, so that those budgeted funds from the grant are not inclusive of this. But next year we have quite a bit more that we'll be doing, and a lot of this work will be done over the summer, from hardening our doors in our schools, single point of entry, and surveillance with integrated technology. So a concerted and combined effort from our information services, maintenance, and safety and security departments in going forward with those projects. One of the things with safety projects, these are areas where you may not see tremendous detail as far as actual locations and what schools are getting done from, well, really from a safety and security perspective, but that we do have the specific project detail, and our departments and department and division heads can provide that detail to this committee as we meet as well. And maintenance projects. So these are our main categories, from air conditioning to building improvements, covered structures, all the way down to roof replacements, floor coverings, and windows. The majority over this 10-year period of the revenue that we'll collect will go towards maintenance and facility renewals. And again, as you see from FY18 and going out, we have some school builds that will be that are already underway, and splitting those larger costs between our maintenance department and some of the new construction in these next 3 years. Each of these, so the roof replacements that you see for $2.3 million, we have the detail of the schools that are expected to have those roof replacements. Again, it's important to note we may have a really bad weather event or just a storm and a tree falls on a school's roof, and that becomes a priority. We may have to shift funds in here, but ultimately that is reporting and information that we get to this committee as we go forward. Floor coverings, fire alarms, sprinklers, and so each of these line items has sufficient detail below it. This is that 60,000-foot view that you had mentioned earlier, Mr. Shemp. And then technology projects, the Atlas program, modernize interactive AV systems. You see an increase as we get into FY21. A lot of this is refresh, and as we go in these meetings or as we have workshops, these specific areas that we have outlined in here, these are obvious areas for specific workshops to go into and do the deep dive into the detail, especially over these next 3 years. That's really good. That's really forecastable. We have a really good idea over these next 3 years what is happening. We have a pretty good idea of the cost as you start getting into year 5, and then obviously out to year 10, it really is a forecast. But each one of these areas is an opportunity to provide a lot more of that detail, to have those workshops in advance of this committee's next meeting, so that you know more of the information, and when we have our meeting, the next meeting, we can get into, okay, here's what we've collected and spent, but here is what is coming, and let's have that discussion going forward. And I'll just scroll over so everyone can see that as you go, you see our 10-year total, our forecasted revenue for over the 10-year period being the $754.8 million. There's another important note. This is a forecasted budgeted amount, revenue. We had a environmental impact recently, obviously, with red tide and green algae. But there is also a polar vortex that is happening up in the Midwest, and you know, there's probably quite a few snowbirds or people that live up there that Florida's looking pretty nice. The point being is this is a forecast, and that is why we will provide budget to actual and stay ahead of what how these numbers will change as far as revenue. And when we forecasted the revenue, we took a historical look over the past number of years and what the actual collections were year over year, and came up with a conservative amount. Last year's actual collection, so 2018, was about $73 million. So we had budgeted for a full year of $65 million. So it is important that we will adjust these as we start receiving actuals and what is coming in, and adjusting the sales tax budget forecast accordingly as well. Obviously, tourism, sales tax, people moving in to the area obviously drives revenue for sales tax. So that these are indicators that we'll be keeping a big focus on, and the expertise that this committee has also can provide some of, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're hearing. Have you thought about this? Is that also incorporated in your forecast? So it's a tremendous opportunity for us as staff to work with and glean the expertise that this committee has as we go forward as well. So,
Mr. Nathan?
Two questions. One, I think I'm missing something, or didn't hear something. There's a line item of your traditional revenue that comes in for capital purposes. I don't know how much that is.
You mean for our traditional millage? That is in our capital plan. So the other piece that so this is specific to the sales tax capital, that we will be utilizing sales tax revenue for capital purposes. So this is just only sales tax related.
So that I understand.
Yep.
That the sales tax revenue is the sales tax revenue.
Correct.
But there is millage revenue that is specific. Were you not locked in on some of that revenue specific for capital?
Correct. So this budget actually becomes a line item in our capital plan as well. So the revenue that we are forecasting and budgeting in our 5-year capital plan, this now is now part of our overall capital plan. And if you want to also see this in relation to that, we can absolutely do that as well.
So again, I'm the one that keeps saying I don't want to micromanage, but I'm missing. There are how much is that on an annual basis?
It's over $350 million.
And so is there like a long grocery list of capital projects that aren't?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and because in the oversight that we have, and I'm trying not to get into the.
This is a great question.
At the same time, what is our role to figure out what gets on the capital list here that goes against the sales tax revenue versus $350 billion a year isn't on this list?
That's a great question, and so so in our capital plan and budget prior to this referendum, you know, we had our plan and we had our capital projects, but it wasn't meeting the need and the new schools that we needed to build and maintaining our schools. Now this is a whole new infusion of revenue, another line item in our capital plan of sales tax revenue. And so now that the projects that we have here specifically, the building of those new schools, the rebuilds of the other 2 schools, the maintenance projects that we have, the maintenance that we have already budgeted for with our regular capital is we have those projects, and then we have these projects that now we can also do in addition because we have this additional revenue. So going forward, and I'm clarifying, so as we go forward from now up until the next meeting and at that next meeting is having that context so you can have that information as well.
That'll be very helpful. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be great item for our workshop to show how the capital plan was in place, the new revenue infusion, and how that list was developed and how they relate. So that's excellent. That's an excellent workshop discussion item. Jim, you got something else?
My second one is much smaller, but trying to understand, are there regulations specific to how you invest this money? When I'm looking at the interest income for the size of the dollars, and I realize that there's cash going out, but I'm trying to understand what your regulations are for the investment?
Yes, there is, and I see Kelly. I didn't know if you were getting up or wanted to speak to that. No, you. The answer is yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Millay. There are rules and statutes governing how the district can invest funds, and specifically, we are required to invest exclusively in qualified public depositories. So those are entities defined that we may invest funds in, and so in addition to that, we have a school board policy that defines the risk that we may or may not assume and further guidelines for investments. We also have an investment advisor under contract with us, and they are required to be able to provide guidance on qualified public depositories and those programs with which we may invest.
And Mr. Nathan and Mr. Chair, we do our investment advisor, Walter Walker, and public trust advisors. They also are very interested and available as again as part of a workshop or even at a future committee meeting to even go through how the monies are being invested and how the income is being earned, and providing that reporting as well too.
Other questions regarding the initial presentation? Mr. Kennedy.
So would it be fair to say that if the sales tax was not approved, that these projects wouldn't be happening, and that by the sales tax passing, that solved a major problem for her?
You are absolutely correct.
Other questions?
Just for me, maybe this is not the time, but in clarification, under construction projects, are there safety and technology rolled into those constructing?
Yes, ma'am. Total, and that's Scott's favorite word, total project cost. All the safety, the physical safety, technology that is related to safety and security, just general technology that goes in every school, getting that, everything you can think of when a new school opens, it's total project cost.
So these breakouts then here where it says technology projects, those are additional.
In addition, correct.
But that's for schools not included in the capital project.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
It's your intention that these are discrete activities. They're not additions to things that are already budgeted in your capital or operating plan.
Correct.
These are discrete projects.
But I mean, there is some, and specific to technology, there's a little bit of crossover, and Dwayne or Trey, you're happy to invite you up to the microphone, sir.
Sure. So there are some projects where the amount that's listed in the sales tax revenue, or in our projections anyway, are part of a project, of the whole project. And for the most part, some of that starts this year, and that was because we dedicated capital funds for this year that before we had the sales tax revenue for things like surveillance technologies and those kinds of things. That's why you see a hole at the beginning of that schedule, because we had to make a decision to dedicate those funds. As you go forward, the only one that crosses over that has a little bit of both will be the Atlas Interactive Technology Package, and this amount is in addition to what we invest on, what we had built into our capital refresh project. Does that answer your question?
I clearly see that this is another important item that we need to discuss at our next workshop on how these funds intermix with your prior budgeted funds to enhance those projects, so we're clear with our understanding is what are we getting for the sales.
That's a great question, because maintenance is another area as well too. And what we have from an accounting perspective is setting up specific, and public fund accounting very different from private sector accounting, but specific projects, fund and object codes specific to sales tax dollars, so we can actually extract that information as well too, so that the lines are very clear and you can see exactly what we are spending with sales tax dollars. But there is crossover specifically with information systems and maintenance.
So I think what the committee would really feel comfortable in knowing is how the final project is funded by the mixture of those two, and which part we're taking and which part was the other funds, so we know completely where those dollars are going.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think that's going to be those two items, both how we relate with the capital budget and how we relate with the existing maintenance budget. in technology budget that's 3 big items for a first workshop.
Absolutely.
And explaining how that works and is identified so the committee feels comfortable in forming an opinion prior to voting. I saw a hand down there. Mr. Schimpf.
Greg, are there sub-spreadsheets of this on a specific school level that feed into this master spreadsheet?
Yes, it's specifically for maintenance. The schools that you see for construction, those are the schools, but where a lot of the detailed school by school is maintenance.
Let's take air conditioning as an example.
Yes.
Specific schools in each of those 10 years that are projected to be done, that level of detail exists at this point.
Yes, it does.
Is it so voluminous that we don't want it? Or would that
Maintenance is pretty voluminous, but I will say that will be one of the documents that you have at each committee meeting and prior is you see the full facility renewal list. Absolutely. I mean, our schools expect that, our public expects that, our parents expect that. It is very big, but that's on us, our maintenance department, again, the team effort to have that information.
From a voter perspective, I think it's important that our committee recognize that one of the things that was fielded was a very specific project list, and it was available to our voters, and it told, my daughter that her daughter's school was going to have new drapes. I mean, it was almost at that level, so that that was the representation made to the voter, and I think it's important that we have a grasp of that. Obviously, it can be fluid over time based on receipts and expenditures and prices, but it's important that we have a pretty clear understanding of what was presented to the voters as they approve this.
And from someone who does fiscal forecasting for governments, specifically new communities who want to become cities, the ability to fiscal forecast beyond year 2 is pretty much hocus pocus. So we will be focusing specifically on the current year and then the next future year, which will cut down on the volume of projects to be dealt with on a meeting-by-meeting basis. We won't be looking at 10 years of maintenance. We'll be looking at the fiscal year in front of us and the projected year next year. After that, with all the variables out there, it's more art than science, I can assure you.
Very good point.
Other questions, discussion? Seeing none, thank you very much.
One thing,
yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Randy.
Are we going to set a meeting date for our next meeting?
No, I would like to work with staff and develop, with the committee's consent, I would like to work with staff, talk about these agenda items, and then we will distribute potential meeting dates and get everybody on board like we did this time before our next quarterly meeting. I would suspect it's probably going to be in the 30 to 45-day range, but I want to work with staff, and I have no idea their capability in producing what I believe we're going to need. So let me work with them this time, and in the future, we'll have a better understanding of how things can be turned over and how quickly we can meet. So a little flexibility this time. I'm thinking 30, 45-day window, and we'll work through our communication person to make sure we're all available.
Very good.
Have an advance notice of that, all right?
Very much, yes, sir.
Okay.
Advance notice like we did this time. Be a few weeks ahead of time, yes.
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is there any other questions at this point?
And go to the order?
Yes. Anything for the good of the order? Why do I feel I'm in a moose club?
Part of our capital plan did include some kind of paraphernalia for each of you. I'm just kidding.
I just want to make sure that I get a copy of statute language and the referendum
yeah, you said they're going to do that. Yeah,
I think the information that was requested during this meeting will be distributed to everybody prior to any additional information that Greg and I put together in preparation for our first workshop.
Good job.
Is that
yes.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion second. Any discussion?
Who made the motion?
Mr. Chris. Seconded by Mr. Caddy.
Second by Mr. Caddy.
Thank you.
Discussion? All's in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Oh.